Hi everyone, it's me, Krista. Welcome back to my channel. Hopefully you had some good holidays, and if you don't celebrate holidays, I hope you've had a great week. Today we're going to be doing a watercolor painting portrait of a woman with some black feathers going on. We're also going to be using some other things such as an acrylic marker, and we're going to be using some liquid chrome marker. Right now, we are just filling in the outline, and the outline for this one is going to look a little weird because I decided to actually put in the eyes as full-on circles to kind of follow the actual shape of what an eyeball is and all that good stuff. I'm going to apologize right now if my breathing seems a little funny or my voice goes. My allergies have been kind of bothering me the past couple days. 'Tis the season for colds and allergy issues. I'm using a mechanical pencil for the outline, which is something I don't normally do, but I have it, so I figured I'd use it. It is a Sumo grip in 0.7. I don't know what the lead hardness is, but I'm gonna guess it's like 2B. Mechanical pencils can be nice for getting outlines because you can get some really nice thin lines with it, and you don't have to worry as much about sharpening it to that fine point to get the same lines. A lot of this project is going to be more of an experiment for me. I typically don't use a lot of watercolor. The last time I did was a couple years ago, and it was another black and white portrait. When I do use watercolor, I almost always use some other media with it. I tend to use the watercolor as more of a base for the shading, and then I'll use other markers or colored pencils on top of that to just add a tiny bit more depth. I do like the softness watercolor can bring, but I am by no means an expert at using it. I'm also using some water pens for the watercolor, which I've literally never used before. They're no brand name. I just bought them off of Amazon a couple years ago, and I was looking through my stuff and I went, I've never used this. And we also got some watercolor board, some Crescent watercolor board, which last time I used that was in a design class in college, so it's been about 10 years. We'll talk more about the Crescent board, that watercolor board, a little bit later, because it warped, and we'll show you some images of that. I do really like the water pens. I feel like I have a little bit better control over watercolor this way than I normally do. And it's nice not having a cup to deal with, just being able to fill these up with a little bit of water in the chamber, and then going back and forth to get the exact amounts of water I need and mixing it. It's just easier. This is comparatively easier to other methods I have used before. And for this painting, we're kind of going for a dark lady with some black feathers going on. It's going to end up maybe being like a fallen angel, or maybe some kind of raven lady. But you'll kind of see where it goes later. I'm getting a little ahead of myself here. And all I'm doing to get the different shades in the watercolor is I'm just mixing it with more water in my little watercolor palette. The watercolor that I am using is Winsor & Newton Cotman watercolors in Ivory Black. This is the student grade. I use the student grade because I don't use watercolor enough to invest in a more professional grade, and these are pretty good. It's much better than using some of the Crayola ones, that's for damn sure. Just a friendly reminder, I am not sponsored by, nor am I affiliated with any of the companies I am talking about. I literally just wanted to do a fun, quick painting. I had an idea in my head, and I just wanted to use some watercolor to get that softness. I wanted an ethereal feeling, and watercolor's pretty damn good for that. I did get rid of her pupils. She was originally going to have some, and she does have a little bit later because I go over with some liquid chrome to give an illusion of a pupil, but I kind of wanted it to feel more sinister. Therefore, the mostly black sclera. Coming up, I did realize that my phone is in some of the shots pretty predominantly. Some of it is going to be blurred out with a black box because y'all don't need to see that much info on my phone, guys. You'll also get to mix some of my super epic hair that needs to be dyed this way. I know you're seeing a lot of my face and hair in the shots, but I had to have the camera pulled a little bit further away, and this is just what happened. I am using part of my shirt to pick up some areas of color where I went too dark. Also, at this point, I had too much water saturation going on, and when that happens, sometimes the paper will pill up. I thought because this was a watercolor board, specifically made for watercolors, as the name would entail, that it wouldn't do that. Apparently I was wrong. Here I'm just showing you how much that board bowed. You can also see that it's pretty thick. It's about an 1/8 inch thick, and the amount of water I put on it just killed it. I would assume that because it's watercolor board it wouldn't do that, but just so you know, if you use this board, do not put that much water on it because it will do this. And although you can't really see it in the video, obviously because I edited it out or I turned the camera off, you do have to allow it to dry in between certain layers depending on what techniques you're doing. If you are trying to do a sheer layer over something in order to get a little bit more darkness in it, you have to do it that way. And if the paper gets overly saturated, like it did for me at certain points, you definitely have to walk away, because if you keep going, you can wear right through that paper and completely ruin it. I really like how much control I have over the amount of water that is being used with these pens though, because it's super easy just to give a little squeeze and add a little bit more, and it's also really easy to just wipe it off and get less water on there. The more water you have, obviously the lighter the shading is going to be, the less water, the darker. Here I'm going to start getting into some of the thin lines, and I just use a really tiny amount of water. Mostly it's just the liquid paint. I am using a liquid form of watercolor. I'm not using like a paint pot pan. Basically for these nice, really thin lines, like I just said, less water, really, really thin applicator. All I'm doing is just slowly adding on more layers to darken up some certain spots, get some more midtones in, because we had some of our lightest lights in, and we had a little bit of shading. We are just making sure we get in some of those nice deep darks, and adding in more shading and more detailing. That's all I'm doing right now. I'm also just adding in some line work to give more definition in certain areas. For the hair and for the feathers, actually for pretty much this whole painting, I start with using more water and slowly decrease the amount of water I'm using in order to get more of those detailed lines in. Because I have my base layer of shading, and once again, less water, darker, thinner line. Sorry, I get in a lot more of the shot and block a lot more of it. The more details I'm putting in, because I'm very, very nearsighted and I have to be practically on top of it to be able to see what I'm doing. It's just part of my life. And I talked about the amount of water to use. Also, to get thinner lines, you have to apply the tiniest bit of pressure. You want to have a very light hand in order to get those baby lines. You want to feel like you're barely touching that paper with your brush tip. One of the great things about this kind of watercolor is if you do apply enough water, you can soften out and blend some stuff that's already pretty dry. It's not going to completely dilute everything, but you can just soften it up that tiny little bit. Least with watercolor, another thing I've found is it's always easier to start lighter and then gradually go darker. Unless there's pieces you want to be really dark, you can do those out of the gate, but it's typically easier to layer darker colors on than it is to lighten them up or remove them. Unless, of course, you use an acrylic marker or a white gel pen on top of it to bring it back up to a lighter color. If you do go from light to dark, it does make it a lot easier to get depth without having to try to correct it as much later. Also, with the exception of some of the watercolor marker, which we're going to be using soon, I pretty much always pre-mix in that little watercolor palette. That also makes your life way easier. That watercolor marker did make its brief appearance. It is a Winsor Newton watercolor marker in lamp black. I like using it for really deep darks, and then you can also use it and mix it with some of the water to dilute it a tiny bit. I'm also using liquid chrome for a lot of those little detailings you're seeing right now where it's really bright, and we used a Sharpie white paint marker. A water-based one, not an oil-based one. The silver I'm using is just a nice little pen. It's called Liquid Chrome, and it's by Molitor or Molitor. I'm not sure how you say it. I thought it added a nice little pop and something a little different on top of it. I'm going to be alternating between those three markers, the black watercolor one, the white water-based one, and the liquid chrome to go and add a couple more details and a little bit more contrast in. You'll notice I'm picking up the board a couple times in between. That's more just so I can accurately gauge how that liquid chrome looks. Because of the angle and it being shiny, it obviously makes a difference on how you actually see it. Unfortunately, here pretty soon, I did lose a little chunk of footage. It was about 15 minutes worth of myself using more of the liquid chrome and more of the white and more of that black marker to get more detailing in. I will be inserting in an image that shows the final product, at least, so you can get an idea of what I did with it. All I really did was go in and just add in some lines with the white marker and then the liquid chrome. Add a little bit of a halo and just use both of those to add more definition. Didn't lose too much, but I did want to show you what it looked like at the end. Thank you again for watching this video. If you liked it, please hit that like button. If you hated it, hit that dislike button. If you have any questions or comments, concerns, feelings, please leave them down in the comment section below. If you want to see more videos like this, or you just want to hear the sound of my voice, please hit that subscribe button. Once again, happy holidays. Thank you for watching.